Unit control, spellcasting, and knowing your opponent's plans and strategy are obviously extremely important to winning a game of Starcraft. However, quite often, victory is determined by the amount of resources you harvest and mine, the units you produce, and the upgrades you research. Hey guys, and welcome to the PiG Daily. Today is my first episode in my How to Improve at Starcraft playlist. In each episode, I'm going to take one very important area of Starcraft. I'm going to break down the best techniques, the best methods for improving at that one area. Today, of course, we're looking at macro, the most important part of Starcraft. We talk about it all the time. Macro is just your ability to earn a lot of money and then to quickly and efficiently spend that money as well as you can in order to keep up in the unit count and overwhelm your opponent, give you the material to play a solid game of StarCraft. So guys, let's not dilly-dally, let's hop straight on into game and let's take a look. The most important part of finding where to improve in StarCraft is being able to find your mistakes so that you've got areas to focus on in order to improve. We'll start off looking at a mid-tier game here. If you're Masters or GM, you might want to skip the next 7 minutes of this video as it's stuff you already know. We'll be looking for Miss Macro to start things out. Now, Miss Macro for you beginners is just a general term we use for any time where you make a macro error. Of course, macro is not completely linear. You can't literally spend every single mineral that comes in the moment it comes in. So, of course, Miss Macro would be defined differently for a new player compared to a pro gamer. A pro gamer sees a very slight inefficiency and says, oh, I mismacroed here. Whereas a beginner player is going to be a little bit more lenient on themselves. Now, the first and most obvious thing you guys should be looking at, especially if you're a beginner, is your money and supply. So you should be always looking at that. And you know what? All this stuff on screen is a distraction. You want to make this simple, you go to a nice dark corner of the map. There's a little bit of, okay, there's a skyscraper here. It's not too much of a distraction. And you want to actually just watch that money and you want to watch that supply. So with money, why is it important to keep your money low? It's because if money's sitting in the bank, it does nothing. If you get more workers out earlier, they get more time to mine money. If you get more army out, you can defend or attack better. If you get upgrades out earlier, then they're having an effect earlier on in the game where they have more impact. Likewise, you just never want to get supply blocked. If you ever hit that supply cap, you just can't build anything. Stops your production, slows you down. So now that that's clear, let's fast forward and let's find some of those mistakes. I'm going to put it on 4 times speed and I'm just watching. Ooh, a bit of money floating. That's fine. Okay, he was just putting his command center down. Nothing to be worried about there. Even though he did touch 400 minerals, of course. That was with a reason. And there we go. Supply cap. I was watching that. I was like, ooh, he's getting close. Looks like our Terran player Necrobius has been supply capped. And ooh, a depot hasn't even started just yet. So this is something that's important to check. If the depot was literally finishing right now, then it wouldn't really be much of a supply block. I mean, he's building an SCV, right? He's not actually having his production stopped, right? But now as this SCV stops, now the production is halted and that depot's still nowhere near done. 10-second supply block here. Is this massive? It's not the end of the world. However, so early on when there's not many distractions going on, I mean, he made the decision to build this depot well before these Zerglings ran in here and started distracting him. He's just made a big mistake. So this is something where you say, okay, you've made an error. Maybe you should have known your build order a little bit better, Necrobius. Maybe you just got to practice that. You found a mistake. That's something to improve on. Let's go back to our dark corner of the map. Let's fast forward again and go, ooh, supply block. 35 out of 36 here from Bullia. So Bullia is a little bit supply blocked here from just before 3 minutes. Even though he hasn't built that last bit of supply, he could have done it. Ooh, so actually supply block from before 3 minutes, and an Overlord's only going to pop out now at 3:25. Yet again, big 25, 30-second supply block. Lots of lava sitting there idle. You might think, oh, there's not actually that much money. Guess what? That's because right after that Overlord popped, he built 2 queens and a 3rd hatchery before he was at 600 minerals. And that's a lot of minerals this early on in the game. Remember, guys, of course, it's not as brutal to be floating that money later in the game. If you've got 1,000 minerals in the bank, 2 minutes into the game, it's fucking terrible. It's a huge part of what you've mined so far. You need to have spent that money on building up your infrastructure, on getting everything going. But if you see a pro gamer floating 1,000 minerals, which is not uncommon, it could be easy for you to say, what the hell? Why are you saying this is bad? I've seen pros do this. If a pro does it, they're probably on 4 or 5 bases. They're at a stage where they're mining so much money, they're focusing on their army because it's late game. It's more important to focus on your army in late game. And as a result, it's completely fine for them to float 1,000 minerals, even 2,000 minerals in some situations, because at that stage of the game, it's a smaller part of overall what's happening. But in your early game, you're floating 500 minerals, you're floating even 600 minerals. Oh, this is a big hiccup, a big miss macro. So let's keep going. Let's see any more. Back to our dark corner of the map. Oh, we can have a new dark corner, some new buildings here. That's a friggin' weird design on that building. What the hell? Oh, there's a little wolf's head down there. Isn't that cute? I wonder if that's like the wolf from Dark Souls. Sif, man. Anyways, 44 supply block. Let's take a look at that. Once again, supply block. Overlords have just started. We know that's a big macro error. Okay, cool. So we've just shown a bunch of different macro errors just by watching the money and the supply. This is the easiest way to find errors in your play whenever you get supply blocked for long periods, whenever you float lots of money, especially in the early stages of the game. Okay, so now you can find these mistakes, you can find these errors, but how do you go about actually fixing them? There's two important things to focus on. Number one is what we touched on before when I was talking about those supply blocks. I was saying, hey, maybe these guys need to refine their openings a little bit. Maybe they need to memorize them a little bit better because getting supply blocked in the first few minutes when there's not that much going on, big hiccup right when you need to be getting those workers out constantly. So having your opening build orders refined helps you avoid those missed macros. Memorize your depots, your overlords, every little detail for especially the first 4 minutes of the game. You'll improve a lot, 100% guaranteed. Now, the other thing I want to focus on is a little bit more Zerg-centric. It is quite Terran-centric as well. Not as important for Protoss at the top levels, but for beginners, still very important for Protoss when you're first learning the game. And this is the idea of a macro cycle. First of all, I'm going to illustrate someone who's not using a very clean macro cycle here in the form of Boolia. So I'm putting it on the live game screen, game speed, sorry, same as what it was played at. You can see down in the bottom right what Boolia's clicked on, and let's look at how Boolia's going through everything. All right, spreading a little bit of creep, fair enough. Trying to do that. Okay, Reaper's being a bit of a dick. Goes and looks in the main base. Is going to go, okay, let's start some upgrades. You see 1-1 started up there, the lair's starting, and okay, it's going to inject just the natural, not injecting the main or the third. Builds a single drone. Builds another single drone here in the main. Why? There's plenty of lava and minerals, not supply blocked. Why only build one drone? That's a bit strange. Zerglings are kind of moving around, going to chase off the Reaper. Now some Zerglings are building. Now a Baneling Nest. Now a gas goes down. Still hasn't injected the other hatcheries. Now builds drones and finally spends all that money. So why am I highlighting exactly what's going on here? Because like I said, guys, Boolia here in this specific scenario is not having a tight, organized macro cycle. He's doing things in a disorganized manner, just injecting one hatchery at a time, only building 1 or 2 drones rather than just building them all instantly in a flash. Let me show you guys what that macro should look like when you're doing things properly. Step 1, inject, inject, inject. Step 2, build units. Step 3, build overlords. That's it. Isn't that just friggin' beautiful, guys? Isn't that just beautiful? Crisp, sexy, efficient. Number 1, injects. Number 2, build units. Number 3, build supply. I'll talk about it for Terran and Protoss in just a moment. Why do you do it this way, guys? Because this allows you to do things efficiently. Not what we were just watching before, where it was build a drone, inject one hatch, build a drone, inject another hatch. That's a waste of APM. Notice here, it took me about 4-5 seconds at most to go inject all my hatcheries, build all of my lava, build overlords, get everything done. And because you only need to do this once every 30 seconds, that's how long your inject cycle takes, your injects before they pop, that gives you the rest of that 25 seconds, or even if you're, say you're half as slow as me, half my speed, you get 20 seconds to go micro, to go control units. I can say, oh, you know what, I've got heaps of time till the next injects, let's put lings all over the map, let's get some upgrades going, let's get a lair going, cool, you know what, I've got time to spare, look, I've still got seconds until my next cycle's ready. And if you do this, you get an inbuilt timer in your head as well, and then you go, you know what? I'm out here microing. Oh, dodge banelings, dodge banelings. You know what? It's time to macro. Inject and whoop. inject, build units, build overlords. Holy shit, that is quick, that is sexy, that is efficient. This is so beautiful. It gives you efficient, quick actions, and it tells you when you can look at your army, when you can look at home. It gives you the rhythm that is at the heart of every StarCraft game. Now let's take a look at the same thing for Terran and Protoss. All right, Terran macro cycle. So it's going to be a slightly shorter cycle, 25 seconds. Queue up 2 SCVs per command center, drop mules, queue up units on your production, and add depots. And then got 15 seconds or so to micro units around, do other stuff before you have to come back and do it again. Protoss macro cycle. Step 1, queue up 2 probes per nexus. It is going to be a 25-second cycle again. Then make units, queue them up out of all your buildings. Step 3, make some pylons. Woo! In whatever shape you desire. And then you can go back to microing your units. So guys, of course, this is the final macro cycle, the Protoss one. You can see that it's similar for all 3 races. And the cool thing is that, like I said, it dictates your rhythm in the game. Having a nice clean macro cycle, so you go back, you do a very clean, quick, organized set of tasks, gets your most essential stuff done. Outside of that, you've still got to worry about knowing how your build works, knowing when to go for what structures, as that's always, different based on the game, based on the situation you're in. So there are other things. It's not like you literally only micro and do your macro cycle, but this is the real core of those actions. And this really covers up the basic fundamentals of how to improve your macro, how to identify your mistakes as a beginner to intermediate player. Now let's move on to some of the fancier stuff for the guys, especially who are in Platinum onwards. Alright guys, on to the more advanced stuff now. Here we go. And what we're going to be looking at is a game of me versus Silky, a great Zerg player, playing here on the ladder. The Grandmaster ladder, just to let you know it's legit. Silky's a very good player, about 6.3k MMR, one of the top North American Zergs right and now. And let's talk about a few methods for finding these miss macros and blockages beyond that basic, just looking at your supply, looking at your money. First one for Zerg is watch the units tab, go on 4 times speed. Whenever you see a whole bunch of lava sitting there, and whenever you see it idling there for a little bit, you got to say, ooh, looks like there was a miss macro. Look back, we could have seen there was a little bit of a supply block there. We could say to ourselves, oh, okay, this was kind of nasty for Silky. Supply blocked on 66 for quite a while. There's a big mistake. Another one for Terran and Protoss would be watch your production tab. Now, if you're watching your production tab, what are you looking for? Okay, constant worker production. There's 2 Nexi finished. Should be building 2 probes at a time. Guess what? There's only 1 building right now. How often is it 2? How often is it 1? Gives me a good idea of how consistent I am with my probe production. You can see a lot of gaps in my probe production here. And here I can say to myself, okay, you're making quite a few mistakes here. That's something you got to focus on. Likewise, if you're a Terran, you can say, I've got 5 barracks production. I should be building 9 Marines at a time. You look at your production tab, you fast forward through a game, you see just how consistent you actually are at keeping up with these tasks. All of these little different techniques are really good for honing in on the separate elements of your play, which you're struggling in. And one of the really important things to do from there is then to go back once you find an issue and then reverse kind of engineer a solution. Figure out, why did this go wrong? Why did this happen? And how the hell can I solve it? All right, so looking at our first big problem, look at my mineral count. Got pretty high there for a while. Got up to about 650. Oof, pretty beastly mineral count. Bit of a problem. Okay, let's go back and let's reverse engineer a solution. So let's go back a full minute and let's see what the hell was going on there. So let's go on my camera this time and let's see what's happening. Okay, so I'm going across with my DTs. I've just warped them in. I'm building a nexus behind it, queuing up a few more probes. Okay, the DTs are going to pull back. I think, yeah, they pulled back. All right, so I'm going to morph some Archons. And, okay, while they're morphing, I got a few seconds. I should go macro. Ooh, I just queued up 1 probe, not 2 probes. Okay, sloppy mistake. So I'm saying, all right, not queuing up units consistently. And I do build a couple pylons there, but I'm supply blocked right now. I'm only at 70. So, that's why I can't keep building probes as well. I was supply blocked. So, note to self, I can go back and look at this and say, you know what, next time, after my Nexus goes down with my Archon drop build, I need to remember to build 2 extra pylons the moment that Nexus goes down. If I don't build those, I always get supply blocked here. So you start to figure out where these issues happen, and then you go back and you start to come up with solutions tailored for that build, that situation. You make a mental note and you really cram that deep in your mind until it becomes a habit. Now also here, notice I'm up at over 700 minerals. I mean, I'm warping in a few centuries, that's something, but where is that money being spent? You can see a lot of indecisiveness. You can almost feel the cogs turning in my head as I'm thinking about what structures I should be putting down. Now, if you're not as high level as me, that's fine for you to be a little bit slow on some of these tasks, but for me, this is indecision. This is being slow. So what I can say to myself is, you know what, to make sure this doesn't happen, next time, the moment I have to pick up those Archons, I should know what my transition is, and I should, in the blink of an eye, be able to execute that. So the moment I pick up, check this out. Bam. What do I need to do next time? Next time, I need to remember, queue up my Warp Prism to go get somewhere else. And because while it's queued up to move there, I know I have about 20 seconds to do macro. What should I be doing instantly? Second Robo, forge 4 gateways instantly. And this should be something which is automatic. Remember here, I'm kind of dilly-dallying with the Warp Prism a little bit. I'm looking back at home. I'm looking around. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll make some sentries. Where is that production? Where are those buildings? Okay, let's put down a second robo. Hurry up. Where are the other buildings? Finally, I start putting them down. Sure, it's only a few seconds. Some of you guys who are not as high level might be a bit shocked by how anal and critical of my play I am. But this is what you need to be. You always need to be looking for these edges wherever you can find them. And this is why it's so good. You identify a macro area, you go back and you say, why did this happen? Let's make sure that never happens again. All right, so I've jumped us forward just a little bit in this game to the point where a whole bunch of surprise mutalisks are flying into my base. And you guys can watch the ensuing chaos right now. And I'm going to actually just talk about a situation which doesn't really pertain to the game on screen. Couldn't find a really great example. However, one of the biggest things I found with improving my own macro was preparing for attacks. Notice how I'm talking about like little responses to situations in that last little analysis. Something I used to realize in the old days, I used to play against a guy in the Sydney scene called YJ, and he'd always pressure me a lot. And I'd get so paranoid about his attacks killing me that every time I spotted an attack coming, I would actually freak out so much, and I would always die from being supply blocked because I would just be like, build units, get in position, position every unit perfectly, and I wouldn't focus on building extra overlords, and he'd kill me just barely with these attacks, and I'd have like 2k minerals in the bank, and I'd have like stopped injecting, and I'd have like not built supply structures. And this is something which is really funny, right? Since then, and I've applied this to every race, is every time I see an attack coming that I'm afraid of or I really want to respect, I actually have a list now of exactly what I do in that situation, and this helps me be safe, but it also just helps me keep my macro up when I'm under pressure. And you know what this list is? Most people, whenever I ask them, what do you do when there's a rush, they say, build units, get in position units, build units. Guess what my first point is? It's build depots, overlords, or pylons. Because that's the one thing that never springs into my mind whenever I'm thinking about dealing with an attack. But this is just part of that. Get your macro sorted whenever you know you have to micro. You see an attack coming, you know you're going to have to micro, so build pylons ahead of time, especially if you're Protoss, because everyone's going to focus your pylons down because they bloody shoot at you now. So you got to make sure you get pylons, get overlords, then build units. And that you waste as little time as possible on positioning and watching your army. And this is that real skill we really see here. The big part of being a great macro player is learning to not spend as much APM and time on positioning and microing units. So much of it is about learning to get the maximum done with your unit control, your army positioning, with the minimum amount of APM. Let's rewind just a little bit and... we did, in the midst of that whole talk, see 1,400 minerals floating. Okay, well, fair enough. There's mutalisks in your base. I'm trying to deal with them by chasing them with a friggin' Warp Prism with Archons in it, which is one of the most comical things. This is the first time I'd ever done that as well. I was like, I guess this is kind of working. It's the most mobile anti-air I have. Blink isn't done. But even just looking at this simple situation, what can I say, guys? A very simple assessment. Guess what? Do I really want to be relying on a Warp Prism with Archons chasing around? It's a good stopgap, right? But I was chasing them for like 2 minutes straight. In that time, I easily could have got more cannons. Look at my main army. I got plenty of Stalkers. Why don't I have these Stalkers split between my bases more effectively? Why don't I have multiple cannons up in every mineral line? My third still doesn't have cannons in it. These are just simple changes which I could make, which would allow me to macro better. Ways of defending better are also things which allow you to be a stronger macro player. Having a sick, tight defense where your opponent can't force crazy amounts of APM out of you is what allows you to macro. Remember, Starcraft is about forcing your opponent around the map, not letting them bully you about and just screw with your APM. Another situation which can happen is you might actually throw your own macro rhythm off by attacking your opponent when your macro isn't in order. Choosing to commit to micro when you're not on top of your macro, and then dragging even more attention away from an area of the game which you've already been ignoring. Watch this scenario. I am trying to do an attack, but oh, there's a counter attack. Okay, let's focus on that counter attack. So I've got to respond stim units, spread them away from banelings. I've evacuated the third and lifted it. And yet without giving myself even a moment to breathe, I'm just going to run onto creep here. And you're going to see, because I'm focusing on micro for such an extended period, both defending a counterattack and then controlling my own assault, well, I'm going to hit 1100 minerals. Let's go back and watch that again. And really think about what's happening here, guys. I am just getting too over-eager. I've just been focusing on micro and the defense. Is it that urgent to attack? No. Is it good to want to be putting the pressure on as a Terran player? Sure, that's great. But you've got to remember, if you've just been microing really hard, the most important thing is to catch up on your macro. If I just paused with my army, just here on the edge of creep, waited 10 seconds, went back, built some more units, built some more depots. Look, I'm only building a Marine and a Marauder right now. Then go in with this attack. With that extra 10 seconds, suddenly make my attack futile? No, not at all. So sometimes you just got to be a little bit more patient. Often when you move out with an attack or a counter attack, you want to pause just before you go in with the attack, get all your macro tasks done, kind of clear that backlog of actions, and only then focus on your micro. Alright, so now let's talk about some more advanced ways to improve your macro and quite a few little race-specific things. First of all, starting out with Terran, we are a little bit earlier in that same game versus Todolki. I'm doing a Hellion opening with a medevac and then a Liberator. And what you're going to notice is I'm not queuing up 2 SCVs. Earlier in the macro cycle, I was talking about queue up 2 SCVs per cycle. But in the early stages, when you start doing these advanced high-level things, you'll notice you're only ever queuing up the units that you need, and there's even going to be gaps in your production on your production facilities. Your barracks might idle for a few seconds here or there, and that's built into the build because it's very perfect. But the most important thing is you're not queuing up those extra units because you want every bit of minerals to be building your depots, building your tech, your infrastructure as quickly as possible. So as you get to the higher levels, especially with Terran, but with Protoss as well, you're kind of only building one unit at a time, and it's only once the harassment, once the fighting ramps up and your APM starts getting pulled to other places, only at that point do you want to start queuing up those multiple SCVs per command center. Here's a tip for you Zerg players, and this one is constantly producing out of this lava. So you're going to notice, you can see what Silky's selecting in the bottom right, and if you watch this, every few seconds, you're going to see him select his hatcheries, and he's going to build drones. And it happens so quickly, you barely even see it. But basically what he's doing is every single time he's got spare lava, even in between his macro cycles, he's just tapping his hatcheries, building drones, tapping his hatcheries, building drones. And you can see them popping up in the production tab if you're missing how quick it happens down here. You're going to see here, okay, queues up a queen, queues up an overlord, and we're going to see it in just a moment. There we go. More drones. Basically, every single bit of spare minerals, trying to get these drones out just a few seconds earlier, get a couple more minerals out of it, can make such a big difference. And to a lesser extent, you can do the same thing as a Terran or Protoss, especially in the early game, looking at your Robo just before the Immortal finishes, queuing up another one. Just before the Void Ray finishes, queuing up another one, rather than waiting for your macro cycle to come around. These little efficiency things can really just make a huge, huge difference. Another point back here from this game of me versus Silky is powering. Powering is a really cool concept. It's basically when you learn to recognize that you're not under threat and you don't need to be building fighting units. So instead of constantly producing out of your barracks or gateways, instead you go more barracks, more gateways, more tech, more infrastructure, more upgrades, and then you explode into the army a little bit later in the game. This is an essential part of Protoss play, especially as you get to the higher levels of ladder. From around Diamond League onwards, you want to learn to understand your opponent's builds very well, learn to recognize when you need to be building those early game fighting units, as opposed to when you can skip them. Here in this Archon drop build, I see a lot of queens, a lot of roaches. I see a lot of defensive things. I see a lot of drones on the third base. I'm not worried about an attack, and you can see I'm not really building a lot of gateway units. I'll make a couple of sentries here, but there was about a minute before this where I didn't build anything out of those gateways. And now I'm just going to power. Rather than focusing on saving that money for more gateway production, I'm just going forge, second robo, 3 extra gateways, really exploding into that production. And this is something which is just so integral to you being a strong macro player as a Protoss. All right, guys, that sums up today's topic. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget this week to tag your territory on the ladder. Get that worker spray paint going. It's this week's challenge for ICYFAR. Get your worker in front of your attack, tag the ground in your opponent's face, and then kick their ass. Send me your most nail-biting, exciting, and fun replays. I'll cast them in next week's ICYFAR show. Information is down below as always. Thank you so much for hanging out, guys. That's all for now. Don't forget to hug a watermelon, kick a walrus, and of course, punch a garden gnome in the gonads. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.